Before we get into today's video, I want to acknowledge that I had some oral surgery this week to address a tooth that had resorption. My gum had to be cut and then sewn back into place during surgery, so a bit of my mouth looks a bit weird right now. I wasn't going to mention it, then I realised that if I didn't and I opened my mouth just right, the comments would be full of people asking about it. So yeah, my gum looks a bit poorly in this video. Sorry. For us consumers, the breadth of choice in the EV marketplace is amazing, at least if you can afford to buy your plug-in vehicle new or nearly new. But with some of the earliest mass-produced electric vehicles to go on sale now approaching 10 years or more in age, and thousands of electric vehicles every year rolling past the end of their official warranty period, there's a new concerning challenge for the electric vehicle world. And for the most part, EV advocates, EV journalists, and industry executives aren't giving this problem the honest discussion that it needs in a world where everyone, not just the wealthy, needs to transition to lower emission transportation as quickly as possible. So let's change that. Let's get stuck in. For as long as you've been able to buy electric vehicles, there's been a pretty persistent stereotype that paints the average EV driver as a tech-savvy early adopter who lives in a politically liberal area, is a college graduate, and works in a job where their paycheck puts them into a pretty high tax bracket. They own their own home, they probably have a pretty high credit score, and they can afford to put deposits down to wait in line to buy the latest and greatest electric cars when they come to market. Oh, and they are the ones who benefit from the thousands of dollars, or insert your local currency here, on offer for those who trade in a gas guzzler for an EV. Even if they really don't need that incentive, they get it. Luckily, that stereotype is slowly being eroded, both as more affordable mainstream models come to market and as more and more electric vehicles enter into the used car market. And although we here at the channel have said time and time again that more affordable electric vehicles are needed before electric cars really become truly affordable for the majority of customers, we're now starting to see governments change tax incentives, rebates to make it easier for those on more modest but still very comfortable incomes to get behind the wheel of an EV. That stereotype is also being eroded by you. And I mean our audience. Alphabet, owner of YouTube, captures a lot of data about our audience, including where you are, what your estimated income is, what age and gender you are, and what your interests are. And over the last few years, we've seen an increase in the number of people watching the channel who aren't comfortably well off. People for whom going electric is not about being an early adopter and having the latest gadgets, but more of a moral imperative to try and do everything we can to ensure we limit the damage we humans are doing to the planet, even if that means stretching themselves to do so. And we're also seeing a growing audience of EV owners who buy EVs just because they're cheaper to fuel and operate on a day-to-day basis. Cars that are essentially helping you save money. Until that is, they go wrong, which is what we are going to talk about today, because while EVs are great choices when the car has a healthy warranty, more used EV owners are running into expensive issues that dealerships are either unwilling to help fix or want to charge you as much, if not more, to fix than you actually paid for the car. I'm going to start by talking about what happens when EVs go wrong early on in their life. Then I'm going to highlight the issues for owners of those same cars many years down the road. Then I'll examine why this problem exists and give some suggestions as to how we can fix it. And yes, this video is going to be a little long, but for a good reason, because we think this topic needs it. New cars might come with some teething problems associated with early adopting, such as finding out you need to take it to the dealership to have some remedial work carried out under warranty, or, as is the case with my F-150 Lightning Lariat Extended Range, that the over-the-air software update that you need just refuses point blank to execute. For the most part, though, new cars come with a portfolio of different warranties. You've got your standard automotive warranty, usually at least 3 years or 36,000 miles at 57,000 kilometres, covering the entire vehicle from tip to toe. You might also have an anti-corrosion warranty, which can be anything from 5 to 10 years. And then you've got a warranty specifically for the car's battery pack, drivetrain, and high-power electronics, which is usually around 8 years or 100,000 miles. That's 160,000 kilometres. If anything goes wrong with your oh-so-expensive lithium-ion battery pack, high-voltage electronics, or power motors, it means you're covered for a significant amount of time. And battery degradation, which every single lithium-ion battery will ultimately succumb to, is also covered, usually with a sliding scale based on capacity loss over a set period of time. The overwhelming majority of EV drivers who buy their cars never have to worry about claiming on any of these warranties. And let's be clear, those warranty periods exist not only because they're required in law in some places, but also because automakers are pretty confident that you won't ever encounter any issues within said warranty period. And while the whole warranty repair process could use some help these days, parts shortages in both the EV and internal combustion engine car industry means it's not unheard of for cars to spend months awaiting new parts, and I have a friend whose Rivian has been in the shop for nearly 2 months awaiting a warranty part. You at least don't have to pay for the repair as long as your vehicle is under warranty. But as I said earlier, those early EVs are now aging out of their warranties. The very first Tesla Model S's are 11 years old now. The first Nissan Leafs are 12, just like the first Mitsubishi i-MiEVs and Chevrolet Volts. The Ford Focus Electric turned 10 last year, and the first generation Fiat 500e, limited production as it was, is also now aging out of its warranty. And while it's fair to say that the majority of EV owners out there who have older cars are still experiencing fault-free motoring with no worries at all, when things do rarely go wrong, costs to fix them can be astronomical. And despite what you may hear from certain parts of the mainstream media, it's not battery packs failing. In fact, it's often parts within battery packs or control circuits when the battery cells themselves are just fine. And to explain things further, let's hand over to Michael, our resident DP.
Back in 2021, I financed a 2012 Chevrolet Volt. It was a car that I had to buy because my last car was totaled in a hit and run, and I was working for a machine shop, which meant I had to be at work on Monday, which means I needed to have a car. I wasn't able to work from home like I can now. The Volt was not really a car that I specifically sought out. I wasn't really for an EV. I wasn't really for a hybrid. It wasn't really anything that I thought fit my particular lifestyle. EVs were still quite foreign to me. And one of my biggest fears was something happening to the electrical system or something happening to the battery. And that fear was confirmed this last month when the Volt had some pretty critical failures. It started off with a innocent check engine light, and later that night it didn't want to park. It didn't want to drive or reverse or really do anything. And so we replaced the 12-volt battery, which is usually the first go-to culprit for these types of issues, but the problems persisted. And it was things like the car going into limp mode, or it's saying that the battery was too cold when it was 60 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I had no idea where to even start troubleshooting this car. And so for the past month, it's actually been at Nikki's while we've been trying to troubleshoot exactly what is wrong with it. Now, in that month's time, we've had a ton of help and we've had a ton of feedback, and we've tried and failed at several different things. Nikki bought a very fancy OBD reader and a subscription to GM software to see if we could maybe fix or troubleshoot the problems ourselves with very little luck. As a final just Hail Mary, I just took it to a dealership with expecting the absolute worst, which was a full battery replacement. I was told right from the get-go that they weren't going to repair a battery, that they would replace it. The numbers that I was seeing online and elsewhere were bouncing between $10, $12, maybe $15,000. The lowest price that I had seen for a replacement used traction battery pack for my car was about $6,000. To put that into perspective, after a little bit of research, I found that to replace the bottom end of a 2022 Honda Civic gasoline-powered car, that would have cost about $3,000 to $4,000, $6,000 at the absolute maximum, which is the starting price range for what a replacement battery for my car actually costs. The Kelley Blue Book value for my car in really good condition is bouncing between $10,000 and $12,000. So a single component replacement part that is the price of the car, to me, was mind-boggling. When they got back to me, they said that it actually wasn't a battery issue and that it was the electronic speed control in the transmission system. Coincidentally, that is a part that is covered under the extended warranty that my car happens to have. So as of this recording, the car is actually being repaired under warranty. I would consider myself lucky. I would consider myself that this extended warranty that I didn't want just happened to save my rear end in this case. But because of this scenario, it has left me with very little faith in affordable EVs, high mileage, early year used EVs for people that are in my financial position. And when I say my financial position, and I think this is a really important distinction to make, because while we were trying to troubleshoot all of these problems, people kept coming back to me and being like, oh, you could just go and get a Bolt, or you could just get a Tesla Model 3. But the problem is that all of those cars, even an entry-level Bolt or a Kia Niro, all of those cars are still out of budget. What is in budget, what is comfortably in budget for me, is about a $10,000 to $12,000 car. Case in point, my Fiat's monthly payment was $212. The average car payment in the United States right now, according to Bloomberg, is about $777, and most Americans can't afford the car payments that they have. And that was just one thing that I wanted to avoid. That was the reason that I chose this car. As someone who now officially works in the EV space, I'm going to be honest, I'm incredibly hesitant to recommend anyone that's in my financial position to purchase a used, high mileage, out of warranty EV. I feel like there could be some really nasty surprises for people that are looking for one.
It's not just Michael either. One of our regular supporters of the channel has been telling us in the Discord chat room how they're now going to effectively have to look for a new electric car to own because the battery pack in their aging Nissan Leaf has a few battery cells that are feeling unwell. A few cells which they cannot easily replace using tools they have at home, and which local garages either do not want to replace, lack the skills to replace, or have quoted a repair cost that's well beyond what would be sensible to do because they quote for replacing an entire battery pack. A car that, for all intents and purposes, would be just fine for someone to own for short daily commutes, were it not for a few faulty cells. It would be like an internal combustion engined car going to the junkyard because of a faulty crank sensor. And while it's fair to point out that any modern car is increasingly complex to fix thanks to computer-connected components and parts that you can't always visibly diagnose as faulty, internal combustion engine vehicles have a healthy aftermarket parts and spares scene that provides at least some alleviation of those issues. Most popular vehicles also have a dedicated band of DIY and professional mechanic fans who'll come up with non-manufacturer approved, often quicker, simpler and cheaper ways to fix some common faults. But while every garage in the world has the tools required to do an engine swap, replace a clutch, or slap on a new exhaust, far few are ready, equipped, or even willing to drop and rebuild a battery pack. So let's examine who's actually to blame. Unlike your traditional whodunit murder mystery, and for those interested, I am very remotely related to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, there are multiple culprits that have got us to this nightmare scenario. They include the rapid rate of technological advancement in the EV sector, automakers who want to gatekeep their intellectual property and protect their dealer network, dealers who are reluctant to invest hundreds of thousands retraining their staff, the completely new skill set that's required to work on electrical vehicles, and the cost of tools required to work on the same. Oh, and of course, parts availability. Just as the personal computer industry changed dramatically in its first 10 years, I mean, we went from using a BBC B dialing up the local bulletin board at 14 kilobits per second to surfing the internet using Netscape Navigator. The EV world has gone from offering cars with 24 kilowatt-hour battery packs and 70-mile, 112-kilometer ranges to offering cars with batteries more than 100 kilowatt-hours in size and with ranges in excess of 300 miles, 482 kilometers per charge. Curiously though, overall vehicle efficiency hasn't changed all that much, but that is for another video. Simply put, automakers aren't making battery packs and components for those early vehicles in large volumes. Unlike an internal combustion engine, whose production lifespan can be measured in decades across a plethora of different models, automakers may upgrade the battery packs they put in a particular model multiple times throughout its 7 or 8 year production run. The original Nissan Leaf, for example, had 4 or 5 battery pack configurations for just its first generation production run from 2010 through to about 2016. Tesla's, they're even more complex because Tesla replaces parts on the production line when it designs a new or better one, rather than at the end of every model year, which is the industry norm. Teslas made a few months apart may have many components that differ between them, even if they were built in the same calendar year. This rapid rate of change might be good for customers, but it means it's very difficult for spare parts for every vehicle ever made to be kept in inventory, and more frustratingly, means that repair parts tend to be more expensive because the automaker in question doesn't have economies of scale in place to reduce the production cost. Sometimes that can benefit the customer. When General Motors committed to replacing the battery packs under warranty in every single Bolt EV made before 2021, it ended up designing and installing a battery pack that was more capable than the original, and then gave customers a brand new 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty. But when it comes to out-of-warranty repairs, this rarely happens. Because of that rapid rate of change, automakers and their suppliers are also not keen on letting their individual intellectual property out for third-party companies to work on. Sure, there are some folks out there developing replacement battery pack solutions for the Nissan Leaf and for some other cars. We'll link to some below, but they do so using reverse engineering techniques because automakers aren't letting third parties look behind that magic curtain. And when you prevent third parties from accessing your data, you prevent third-party repair parts from being developed. And again, unlike an internal combustion engine vehicle, where you can, for example, simply measure and copy a mechanical component, it's much harder to do that with a battery pack or an electronics module. Then we have the dealer network. You might not know this, but dealer networks have to put their sales and service staff through training every time a new model comes to market. Usually that training is minimal because it builds on existing knowledge held at the dealership. But in the case of plug-in vehicles, they're often starting from zero. Moreover, automakers usually require dealerships to pay to go through that training in order to be certified as sales and service for each vehicle. If that wasn't enough, dealerships also have to pay for the service equipment required to safely work on those vehicles and ensures that they have the proper tools for each vehicle, as well as properly designed lifts for battery packs, specialist tools for filling and emptying coolant systems, and of course, high voltage safe tools, not to mention for some more in-depth repairs needed by some out-of-warranty vehicles, complex electronics diagnostic equipment that a few years ago would have just been used in specialist computer repair shops. The end cost to the dealership is usually in the hundreds of thousands or more. Then if you add in a rapid charging station, and the cost goes even higher. At the dealership where Michael ultimately had his warranty work carried out on his car, only one team member at the facility is trained and certified to work on volts. There are good reasons that certification is required. If you don't have a certified mechanic working on the car and something goes wrong afterwards, there are massive liability issues at play. And if you don't know how to safely work on the several hundred volts of DC power present in an EV battery pack, you could do seriously bad things to yourself and those around you. That not only makes trained mechanics in demand, but it also means that the dealership can charge a premium for any technician who is fully trained and ready to work on an EV. Even then, though, most automakers train service staff to do just a set series of things, like dropping a battery pack and replacing a battery pack. They're taught to do things that allow for maximum vehicle throughput for minimal training outlay. Replacing the battery pack fits that requirement. Replacing one component within a battery pack does not. While the former means the employee can go on to do another job that the dealership can charge for, the latter takes a lot longer and results in less profit. For the customer, though, it means that instead of replacing a component worth a few dollars from 8 hours of tech work, something which I conservatively estimate would cost maybe a few thousand, they're left with a potential bill of, in some cases, 10 or more thousand. And faced with that, most people will do what the majority of EV owners we've spoken to in this situation have done. They just look for another car. If you own your vehicle outright, that might be just a frustration. But if you're underwater on a loan that you've stretched yourself to be able to afford, it's a source of great worry. Independent garages fare even worse than official dealerships, as they have to not only pay for the training, but also find themselves paying higher prices, read retail prices, for parts, rather than specialist trade parts for buying direct from the manufacturer. And in the case of some cars like Tesla, it's almost impossible for independents to get the parts they need because Tesla won't sell them to unauthorized repair shops. And if they're not trained and they can't get the parts through official means, most will just not want to work on your EV. The final frustration comes from this ongoing parts availability crisis. While parts for new EVs may be a few weeks, or in the case of one friend, 2 months away, older parts may be located thousands of miles away, not be readily available, or indeed show up as no longer in production. Michael's issue with his Volt required shipping a part from halfway across the US. But had Michael suffered that issue in the UK, where the Chevrolet Volt was sold for a few short years as both a Chevrolet Volt and a Vauxhall or Opel Ampera, he could have found himself waiting several months just to have the part found and shipped across the world, no doubt at great expense that would have made the repair untenable, and the car's appointment with a recycling specialist, junkyard, much more of a certainty. It's just like those recent tales in the news of Apple Mac laptops heading to landfill because the T2 security chips in them, something Apple's used for the last few years, locking the entire computer up if you don't know the password of the original owner. Is there a way to bypass these chips? Yes, I've seen videos that show it's possible to desolder the entire chip in question and reflash it externally before replacing it on the computer. But just like there is technically a way to replace a faulty cell in an EV battery pack, it's not officially supported or sanctioned. It's something that takes a lot of time, skill, and equipment. And it's something that most people just can't justify the cost of paying someone else to do. So, where are we? Depressed and beyond hope? Not quite. There will always be clever folks who develop smart ways to bypass official lockouts. There will always be people who hack together elegant solutions to frustrating problems. But in order for those solutions to become mainstream and affordable, the auto industry needs to change the way it operates. We need automakers to make their factory manuals and specifications more readily available through right-to-repair legislation. We need diagnostic software that doesn't require a multi-$1,000 subscription in order to access right-to-repair. And we need automakers to allow third parties to develop solutions for out-of-production vehicles that, let's be honest, those automakers really no longer want to support. For example, if Nissan was to pass on the specifications of its battery packs and BMS electronics for the early Leaf to third-party specialists who could then build solutions that required no reverse engineering and could be scaled to mass production, we'd see fewer Nissan Leafs heading to the junkyard. Third-party reverse-engineered solutions do exist. They're expensive. They're clever. But for most owners, they're not worth the money. Opening up the specs of out-of-production models would dramatically reduce the cost to keep those vehicles functioning. Automakers also need to be investing time and money into training dealerships. Frankly, I'd personally love to see automakers fund training programs at local community colleges where the next generation of automotive technicians learn how to work with electric cars when they're getting their initial certification. This would not only ensure they have better job prospects, but ensure that everyone, even small mom-and-pop shops down your road, could work on EVs while reducing the initial outlay those shops would need to spend in order to be properly prepared and certified for working on plug-in vehicles. Then, extended warranty companies also need to be more accommodating when it comes to EVs. While most extended warranty companies will now cover electric cars, they have massive waivers about battery packs and high-voltage drivetrain components. Michael's issues with his Volt ended up being covered under warranty because the original error we thought was a sensor fault within the battery pack ended up being a fault with the transmission control module. That differentiation turned his repair from "it's not covered" to "we'll pay for it." Finally, we need to push for right-to-repair legislation and support at all levels, both locally, nationally, and internationally. We need to promote sustainable repair techniques that don't cost thousands, and we need to push automakers to design their vehicles and their battery packs to be more easily repairable by independent garages and, where appropriate, properly versed and trained enthusiasts. Based on my cursory research, it's often not the battery cells that fail and die in an EV, but rather something within the pack that's not designed to be easily replaced. Until that is changed by the industry, we're really not going to have EVs that are either affordable and repairable, or indeed EVs that stay on the road for 20 years after they're made. And if we want everyone to make that transition to electric vehicles, that is exactly what we need to happen. And on that note, we are done with today's video. And if you want to know more about the not quite a classic Mac behind me, stick around until after the credits. If you liked today's video, you know what to do, and feel free to tip us with a super thanks. The comments are open for your thoughts, as is our Discord chat room, there's a link below. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell and follow the links to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links below to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin and swag store, and do check us out on Mastodon. We have our very own server. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing Charged Up supporters, and shout-outs go out to our self-driving tier supporters: Mike Weeder, Tony Moss, Linda Irish, Sean Tucker, Patrick Boyarski, Paul Nelson, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Michael Goad, Bennett Elder, Andrew Martin, Pedro Mora Pinheiro, Brophy Wolf, Chris and Michael Johnson, Tazlet and the Gong, Dan Blair, Peter Dillinger, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Denny Hyde, Chris Centaur and Jim Burness. Finally, out of this world thanks to our top tier supporters: Robert Flannery, CPU Freak 101, Andrew Glenn, JP Fagerback, Joe Bresney, John Lyons, Rory Litwin, Kevin Burridge, Dave Kitchen, Aaron Hahn, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Paul Conway, Reggie Watts, Will Graylan, Ellery Hensley and Ian. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know your thoughts below. And as always, I'll be back soon with more content, as will the rest of the team. Enjoy the rest of your day, and as always, keep evolving. Today I have with me, I think, my newest old Mac. It is 13 years old, and so I do consider it a vintage Mac. It is an iMac 11,1, I believe, from 2010. It might be an 11,3. My brain is still a bit fuzzy from my oral surgery earlier this week. It is a glorious iMac. It has a fully replaceable CPU, and I have a CPU downstairs that I'm going to be replacing to make it a little bit more capable. You can also replace the graphics card. It is, I think, probably one of the most upgradable iMacs that Apple ever made. It predates the start of Apple kind of locking everything down and using specialist components, but you can put an SSD in this, you can upgrade the CPU, you can upgrade the graphics card, and the screen literally just pulls straight off. No tools required, it's just held on with magnets. Unfortunately, this one has got a little bit of a chip on the glass, so I'm going to need to get some replacement glass for it. I have no idea where I'm going to get it, but it appears that it got chipped when it was in the server room and I was moving some stuff around, so I'm kind of sad about that. Sad Nikki is.